So now you can see they're genuinely thinking, okay, some sincere soul searching might be in order so that we don't lose again. It's not so that they can save their reputations or do good journalism, Glenn.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to dump on Joe Biden now because Joe Biden's never going to run again. No one needs him anymore for anything. And ever since he was forced out of the race, they kind of started turning on him. But here's the thing. Kamala Harris, as vice president, was not only one of the closest people to Joe Biden, at least in theory. I mean, she met with him all the time, that's for sure. But she also has a constitutional duty as vice president. There's the 25th Amendment to alert people if the person who has all this power, who's running the executive branch, who's the commander in chief of the armed forces, is incapable of doing the job. And not only didn't she do that, she was one of the most overt liars in defending Joe Biden before he dropped out, insisting that he was sharp as a tack and all of that. Why isn't there, if this is a genuine sort of let's figure out what we did wrong kind of moment, simply attacking Joe Biden is really kind of pointless. And even sort of saying, hey, we have to figure out what to avoid next time getting caught. That's even worse. I mean, Kamala Harris is probably going to run for governor. She's talking about running for president again. She bears a lot of accountability for perpetuating this. And this is not a trivial lie. This is fundamental to our democracy. And you don't see any accountability trying to be brought to her by these journalists because she's still valuable to them.
Kamala Harris didn't even know what the 25th Amendment was. I got dollars to donuts. She probably thought it was the rental car policy that requires you to be 25 years old before you can rent a car. This woman was out there, couldn't even lead the Senate in the Pledge of Allegiance a couple of days ago. She doesn't even know the pledge, or she says it so infrequently, she forgot it in the moment. I'm sorry, but it was ridiculous. Here's that moment.
Join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the
to the flag. It's what kids used to say every day, at least in elementary school, including yours truly. And my little guy in his elementary school did too. But Kamala Harris, I don't know. I guess they didn't do that out in Canada where she was raised.
You know, Megyn, I think, and this is like kind of an intangible, but I think one of the biggest problems with Kamala Harris as a politician is that she was constantly petrified of saying something that would bring embarrassment to her. And that insecurity generally comes from a lack of knowledge. You know, if you're supposed to know about something, but you don't, you want to be as vague as possible. She spent her entire life until she got to the Senate, 6 months ago, doing, law. She was a lawyer. She was a prosecutor. Totally perfect profession, nothing to be embarrassed about with that. All she knew, though, all she really knows is the law. She knows criminal law. She knows how to prosecute, or at least she knows about prosecution. She never thought about, studied, and got involved with foreign policy, economic policy, immigration policies, curing the root causes in Central America of instability and poverty in those countries, the things that she was supposed to be able to speak on. And she knew she was a fraud. That's why for 3 years we never heard from her except in the most scripted ways. And they tried to confine her that way during the debate, during the election too. Remember when she wouldn't even sit down with a reporter for so long, and then she finally didn't. It was like the friendliest reporters, and her worst moments were often with the friendliest reporters, like on Stephen Colbert and The View, when she's like, I wouldn't be different than Joe Biden at all. I can't think of anything that I would have done differently. She's a terrible politician. She knows almost nothing. And the entire attempt to foist her on the country with no votes, no debates, no democracy was at least as bad as what the media did in concealing Joe Biden's mental decline.
Well, that's an interesting question. Which is the bigger lie? That Joe Biden was competent for the job, or that Kamala Harris was?
You go back and look at how Kamala Harris was talked about all the way up until the time that she was bequeathed to us by Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama.
Yeah.
She was a national joke. There were all these stories in liberal outlets, like she was firing her staff constantly. She had no role to play. Everything she did turned, to crap. She was not trusted to do anything. She was never considered. She ran for president once before and dropped out before the first vote was counted, despite having every structural advantage, massive cash from California, where she comes from, a huge campaign structure. She was a historic figure as a Black woman, so the media loved her. She had every conceivable advantage, but she was such a terrible politician, she couldn't even make it to Iowa. And then suddenly we were supposed to be told, and she was chosen by Joe Biden because he had promised to choose a Black woman for his vice presidency. That's the reality. He only had 2 or 3 choices, none of which were particularly good. And that is the truth. And the media on a dime, Megyn, turned around and tried to convince us that she was like this historic pioneer, this generational political talent who was going to, inspire young Americans and come out to droves and crush Donald Trump once and for all. The whole thing was a fraud. It was a complete fraud. It lasted about 3 weeks. And then the whole house came crashing down because it was built on no foundation. Yeah,
just like her accents were a fraud. We gonna win. We gonna win. Have you not decency, man? Like it was just so fake. I don't know. I'm asking myself that same question. Which is the bigger lie, that he was competent to do the job, or that she was? God, they're tied, because Joe Biden was totally incompetent. He did not have the mental acuity. He still doesn't, and he's still president right now. I certainly couldn't do a second term. And she, in my lifetime, she's the biggest moron to ever run for president or vice president, ever. And that became more and more obvious day after day.
And the reality is that Joe Biden knew that, which is one of the reasons why he was so determined not to drop out. And I don't blame him for, on some level, thinking that he would have been the better candidate, because it's hard to imagine how somebody could have been worse. And on top, he's at least proven over 50 years that he is a adept politician. He knows how to win elections. In 2020, he won. He was in the Senate won for vice president. Yeah, it's like, even with his brain melting, there's still like a part of him that you just kind of like, you wind him up and he's like, hey, I'm Scranton Joe. And it's like an instinct that she completely lacks. So I almost understand his bitterness, but the Democratic Party was in a huge bind because they knew she was not even close to their strongest candidate. The problem was, had they chosen Gavin Newsom or Josh Shapiro or even Gretchen Whitmer, there were a lot of people in the base of the party on whom they rely who would have said, how dare you pass the Black woman by, who was elected, who was at your side, who was next in line, and choose a white male or a white candidate instead. And the identity politics framework that they created, that they thought would help them, has become their Frankenstein. And they were trapped. They were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. And they hoped that the media would be able to create enough of a fraud that it would lift her and hide her flaws. And it just didn't come close to working.
It's amazing. Thank God the American people saw right through it. Now, they saw through most of the media lies. I have to say, that's why Trump won. But it wasn't for lack of trying on the media's part to mislead them. And Grabian, who does these great mashups, put together some of the lies that we saw from the media leading up to the election. And just in 2024, we've only cut a minute soundbite. This could go on, but here's a sampling. Look at this, SOT 9.
It's a growing and insidious trend in right-wing media, broadcast, print, and social media. It is to take highly misleading and selectively edited videos and then use those videos to spread messages virally to cast doubt on President Biden's fitness for office.
Tim Walz beats America, Talks like a regular person.
Tim Walz is the opposite of weird.
A happy warrior, folksy backstory.
Wicked sense of humor. Look how happy the pig looks. That's good.
It's hard to believe that J.D. Vance could be any more extreme.
It's like a freak show of bros.
Dark and ugly beneath the dignity of most politicians.
J.V. Vance.
JD is at the far extreme.
The most extreme. Being one of the most extreme.
Angry and mean and dark.
This guy is really weird, y'all.
Our current president of the United States has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son.
And Joe Biden has very clearly said he would not pardon his son. He would not commute his sentence. How can Republicans keep making this argument now that Joe Biden has really put it out there?
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
That is amazing. What a great montage of the lying they did, because every one of those, I believe they knew they were lying.
despite how much I criticize media and journalists, or if you want to call them that, journalists, if you're being very generous, I actually believe in journalism a lot. Like a lot of times I'm criticizing it because I want us as a country to have good journalism. It's absolutely crucial. And one of the things that sickens me the most when I listen to montages like that, the lying is very apparent. It's the herd behavior. They read from scripts. And I don't mean this metaphorically. I believe they get literal scripts. You know, like 2 weeks ago when Elon Musk spoke out against the spending bill, and it ended up being sabotage. And you saw this coordinated effort by the Democrats to call Elon Musk the president to try and drive a wedge between him and Trump, which was so obvious.
Yeah.
Go look at how many Democratic politicians, how many people in media did that overnight. They all copy one another. They speak to one another first. They pick up on each other's language cues. There's no individuality. It's supposed to be like a profession of iconoclastic, adversarial spirit. And there's none of that. So not only are there all lies in that montage that you showed, it's all so redundant. You turn on any one of those channels, you read any of their op-eds, they're all saying exactly the same thing. It's coordinated lying on top of just lying.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. That's why that weird thing about J.D. Vance caught fire, because they all loved it so much. It got for Tim Walz the nomination, which was great, as it turns out, for the Republican ticket. And once again, proves that they just don't have the power anymore. The American public sees through these lies. They knew Tim Walz was the weird one. J.D. Vance is not weird at all. He's actually quite normal, which is one of his best selling points. You know how much my family and I love our dogs. Yes, even Strudwick. He was so sweet on our vacation. I can't imagine life without them. These guys have a great life, but some dogs are not so lucky. And this is why I'm so glad to tell you about Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. They have rescued thousands of dogs, plus cats and horses too. They provide all the animals with shelter and safety, and most of all, with love. And they've been doing it for more than 45 years now. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions, and giving can bring tax benefits to you too. Speak with your estate planner about how you can grow your estate while helping animals in need. And check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more. We love our Thunder and Strudwick, but would like for other dogs who need love to find it too. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.